recording now. Audio is on. All right, so now, yeah, so the recording is on and the audio is on. So let's just, few administrative things first. Middle of the semester, week 7, ending week 7. So let's go over content. And then you can see we are currently on intrusion detection. So we've gone over attacks, sniffing and spoofing, and now we're getting ready to look at defense. So this week, I started the IDS, intrusion detection lecture. I'll continue that lecture next week. And then we'll be able to start the firewalls lab, which the firewalls lab is a long one, but it's a very, very fun lab. Okay, and then there's a few things related to the term project. Okay, so let's just see where we are on homework assignments. I believe there's a homework due today, which is the TCP/IP parts 1. So that says due February 25th. Today's the 25th. I've seen that most of you have already submitted this, which is good. The second part of it is just a TCP session hijacking. As you know, that's due next Thursday. So work on that. If you have any questions today, you can just ask questions about that or any homework really. Okay. And then I started the lecture on Tuesday of intrusion detection systems, IDS, right? And so that I'm not going to assign this yet, given that you still have 2 homework assignments due, but just be aware I've already provided a little bit of the lecture, and the lab for this one is basically, I think this, I think it's this one. Yeah, it's this one. You just have to download it. For whatever reason, that doesn't display. So and I already went over this on Tuesday, so I'm not going to repeat the exercise, except to say this is the lab basically, right? Go over, everything is here, everything that you need. Remember, there are 5 problems, DDoS, exploits, and scans, and then you just have the last 2 parts. Okay? So that's basically, if you're done with the TCP/IP attacks 1 and 2, you can start working on this lab, okay, and submit it. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about that, the other thing I want to do today is form your groups, okay? We have, of course, as I said, we're on week 7, so I want you to start thinking about the term project. Now, obviously, you might be asking, so what's the term project about? And so let me just do that first. Okay, so this is recording. So the project, as I usually do it, and all the documents are already on Brightspace, so you can just read through them. But it's basically, as you might imagine, it's a simple idea. Okay, it's a simple idea. You have some kind of a business. Okay, so you have some kind of a business. Right? So you have some kind of a business. So then in the business, you would have, obviously the description of the business. The business will have some kind of a network of some kind, whether it's a fixed network or broken up into parts. And then you would basically think about the whole security aspects of it, right? So we already know how to do some attacks, and we're starting to look at defense, etc. So that's really the idea, basically. So to keep things simple, we don't have to build a very complex network or anything like that. We just have to keep this idea that you have a business, whatever you want it to be. You sell, you have a factory, or it's an e-commerce or some other kind of business. That's entirely up to you. You have to basically pick an idea. Pick an idea for a business, right? I would suggest don't make it too complicated, okay? Keep it simple. And then you would have, the way that I usually do this is I break this into 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. So part 1 is not technical, really. All you have to do is do the risk assessment of the of the business. So the risk and control matrix. Obviously, this is a topic that I still need to cover as part of the lecture. If you've taken my 350 course, you kind of know what this is going to be about. And so, but I'll provide a lecture later on in the semester. So this part is just really, you know, the way that I can say this in a simple way is just a documentation of the business, okay? So usually a risk and control matrix revolves around the assets, the threats, and the controls, okay, that you have in a business. So you'll say, for instance, you know, what are the assets that I want to protect? Well, you know, privacy of my users, credit card information, physical servers, the reputation of the company, the intellectual property, all those kinds of things that would have value. And then you identify the threats, and then you identify what the control should be to secure those things. So encryption, VPN, IDS, firewalls, MAC locking, whatever you want to do, you know, policies, sign-offs of documents, things like that. All right, so the risk and control matrix is usually like a table or an Excel spreadsheet of this information. So it's all revolving around your business, right? Revolving around your business. After that, so that part is not very technical. And then the second part is the more technical part, right? So the more technical part is, as you know, there's all these attacks and there's all these controls that we're gonna, you know, we're talking about throughout the semester, right? All these technologies. So my suggestion is you're going to have to think about how you can create a network. Okay, so create a network. Since we are in this strange environment, okay, of you know, because of the pandemic online, build the simplest network that you can build, you know, kind of like what we've been building with the VMs. It's perfectly fine to use a virtualized environment, okay? You can even do the following. So this is something that we considered last semester, is that student 1, student 2, because you guys, you know, you're in your own homes, you can be together, but you build, you know, you imagine that you have this common network. I'm just going to say, you imagine you have this common network, right? Like this. This is a switch. This is a switch 1, switch 2, switch 3. I'll talk a little bit more about this, why I like to use this idea. And then this is a firewall. This is a router. So you've seen me, you know, when we talk about levels of trust, we'll say this is the internal network, which is basically the company. This is the DMZ, which is the area where you have web servers, etc. And this is the external network, or the web, basically the internet, right? So unfriendly. So what you can do here is that a student, what I've suggested is that each student can say, like, you know, something like this. You see that, guys? So even though they're not connected, it's like you take a piece of the network whenever possible and you focus on it. If there's anything internal, you know, like that. So you kind of virtually describe this bigger network, which, by the way, keep it simple. And then each of you can take a piece of it, right? And you'll focus on things about the network. So obviously what we're going to explore as part of the project is you're going to implement, you know, controls or defenses, right? So we still need to cover a lot of things. So VPN, and a lot of these things will be about things that we've already done in the labs. I just want to see you guys now implement them in real time, and you will demo this at the end of the semester. Do you see that? So obviously, you can use a lot of the labs that we've already used in the class, but I do want to see a little bit of creativity, okay? It's something that you want to do. So like we've talked about taking the IDS, right? The IDS idea and enhancing that, all right? So you can do that, and then, you know, so basically whenever, you know, at some point later, I'll show you guys how we can kind of have two computers you know, just mimicking specific segments of your network, and you can just focus on that. Okay, usually if we were in the lab, we would have you know, the whole network kind of together. But even then when we're in the lab, actually, it turns out we always just end up segmenting things. So whenever I have a problem, you know, that the students are going to work on, I actually just tell them, you know, just build this part of the network and focus on that, right? So so that's what we're going to be planning on doing this semester with the project. Okay. So again, I'll repeat. The basic idea is come up with a business. You can make it up. It could be fake or it could be a real one, but keep it, you know, don't go and try to build all of Amazon. Right? So that's, you know, crazy. So it's just something small, or build it yourself. Part one will just be a risk assessment. This is a set of lectures I still have to do. Part two, you already know, is the technical aspects of this course, which basically is network security. So attacks and defenses, sniffing and spoofing, literally. Remember that sniffing and spoofing is not just for attacks. You can also think of it as defense itself. Okay. So, and then, as I said, start thinking about building the network, obviously, right? I'll give you an idea of why I kind of always want to use the specific network setup. And then you will start thinking about, you know, let's call them like use cases or experiments that you want to run on this network, like improving the IDS, you know, creating a honeypot. You know, what do you do with the firewall? You know, how can you, you know, work with the VPN, you know, all kind, and other things that I'm not covering, right? So one of the attacks is DNS attacks, for instance. And I haven't really, although if you took 372 with me, you already know a little bit about that attack. But if time permits, that's something else that we can integrate, and so on. Okay, so that will be the idea. You're going to form groups of 3. Okay, so you know, no more, no less, as much as possible. Groups of 3, maybe groups of 2, but this could be a lot of work. So make sure you do a good job. So this has to be a document. You will present this at the end of the semester, and then the demo also. You're going to document it, right? Create a report, but also the goal will be, hey, this is kind of the network that we thought about, and then these are the types of experiments that we set up. And then at the end of the semester, you're going to demo it. Now, as I said, you can use some of the labs, you know, Python code, C code, etc., NetWalks, and obviously all the tools that were, you know, the Snort, whatever, but you have to add to it with your creativity. You can't just go and do like a whole bunch of labs. There's got to be a little bit more of a theme to it. So a lot of students, as I said, they do an IDS, or they do like a honeypot, or we'll explore some other ideas. If you have Raspberry Pis at home, I can show you guys how you can even build some physical networks, because you can build things, you know, as I said, you can build just parts of it, okay? But at the end of the day, it's all about, you know, threats and controls, right? So attacks and controls, and explore some of the ones that we've done in the semester, plus maybe some new things that you're curious about. Does this make sense, guys? Does the idea make sense? Do you have questions? Okay, makes sense. Good. All right, so that's good. So the first thing I want to do, usually this works better, like everyone's shy like this. So usually this works better by creating breakout rooms, okay? So I'm going to create the breakout rooms. That at least will make me feel glad that everyone is in a group, which is the main thing I want to do. And then I want to see what your thoughts are, or your questions about what you're going to do. So today is all about the project, getting you to start thinking about it. Because if you think about it, we're on week 7. Next week is, you know, week 8, which is the middle of the semester. Then pretty much we have spring break, and then the last 6 weeks go by really fast. Okay, these projects are going to be due the week before finals. We'll have a final exam, but the week before finals, you will have to do your demos and your presentations of your topic. Okay, of your topic. So I just want to see what direction you guys are leaning towards. Now, keep in mind, we still need to cover a few things. Firewalls, of course, we're going to do a lot of that. A few more attacks, VPN, encryption, and obviously you can start researching other topics as well. I still need to cover radius servers, AAA authentication, and a few other things. Okay, but common theme, obviously, it has to be network security, sniffing and spoofing. At the end of the day, everything that's happening in the network can be summarized into either sniffing and spoofing. All right, so that being said, then let me go ahead and create the groups. Okay, that's the first thing that I want to make sure I do. So at this point, I've talked about the project, right? I've talked about the project, so I don't need to record the rest of this. Okay, I will post this video. You can always watch it again for the description of the term project, but I am going to pause the recording at this time. One of the documents, but I'm recording now. Okay, so it's recording. So as I said, this is just a simple, most businesses would have something like this, right? Whatever you have on this other end, right? That can be pretty complex depending on your organization. But in essence, you would have just something like this, okay? So the idea is if you have a customer, right? The customer, let me change here. The customer could get to the web server and could get as far as here, right? But because this is the internal network, they should not get through here, okay? They should not get through here. Now, if you have an attacker, they're also on the outside, right? Because the switch 3 would represent the web, so you can also have an attacker. An attacker obviously will have the goal of getting into your network, right? So an attacker will try to hit your router. They can hit your web server, and they can hit as far as here. But an attacker also should not be able to get through the firewall, right? And cannot get to your internal network. So, but remember, they live on switch 3, which is the web, because it's the entire internet. Another type of person that you can have on this is what is called a remote worker. And this will be relevant when we talk about VPN. So for instance, here you have the remote worker. So the remote worker is the only one that in theory could get in. So they can obviously get through here. They can get to the web server. They can get to the firewall. And usually firewalls like Cisco have VPN. Right? And so once that happens, they would be able to get an IP of the internal network and then be able to work in some segments in the internal network. You guys see that? So obviously a lot of the labs that we will be doing, will revolve about thinking about firewalls, will revolve around thinking about intrusion detection systems, will revolve around thinking about VPNs. Obviously we've talked about attackers already, right? And a lot of these things are just, if you think about it, they're just simple servers. So anything in this example that I gave you, anything here, is just a Linux server, okay? So, this is obviously some kind of a switch, but all of these things would just be either regular computers, Windows, Linux, etc. Okay? This one is a web server, preferably a Linux Apache server. You can have an email server, DNS servers here. So again, they're just Linux devices, CVM, the Ubuntu, any Ubuntu can mimic any of those. Over here, obviously remote workers would just be a laptop, right? Any laptop that you can connect. And that, to do either a VPN connection, or mimic that behavior. Obviously the attackers, right? The attackers are just anyone with a computer that would launch NetWalks or Scapy or something like that. And then the customer, again, usually just somebody with a browser, etc. Okay? So as you can see, a lot of these things you can mimic. Now, the other thing that we're going to have to mimic is we're going to have to think about the routers and firewalls, right? So either trying to create on VMware a type of forwarding, right? So a forwarding of the packets. Okay, so that's something that we can think about. But of course, for that, we will do the firewall labs, right, and the VPN labs, which will give us a little bit more information about it. So the question is here that your term project is to think in terms of a big picture like this. Okay, so you don't have to implement the whole network. Some of it can be just like on paper, and then you focus on one specific segment of it, of something that you want to do. So like I said, you really want to build an IDS that does the detection, or a honeypot, a network security related honeypot. Another thing you could do is trying to set up a VPN with Active Directory. So usually how that would work is, in this switch, you would have your domain controller, right? Windows is fine, right? Windows, latest. You'll need to get a VM for the latest version of Windows. This would allow you to implement radius services. We'll talk about this a little bit later. AAA services. And then when people try to connect to the VPN and the firewall would need to connect to the domain controller. The accounts are here, and so therefore you authenticate. Somebody, and this obviously would be from a remote worker over here. But at the end of the day, that's really, I'm leaving it to you guys to pick one, right? So pick something that you want to do, thinking about this network setup, okay? This network setup. Or any other ideas that you might have. So that's why it's a project, right? So it's a term project so that even though I've given you a lot of tools, you can actually use your own tools. You can choose your own approach to this, okay? I do want to point out that I do have some documents about this on Brightspace. So let me do that. There's a lot of documents actually that you can read through. So let me switch over to Brightspace. All right, so there's a lot of documents on here about this. And it's really the one, so these are labs. So we still have to do, this is a lab, this is a lab, this is a lab, this is a lab. This is the RCM thing that I was talking about. But these three things that you see here are what you can use as reference for this project, okay? So you can see here, there's information about, more information about firewalls, okay? And then here you have the diagram that I just drew. I think that's this one. If I click on it, okay, you can see that's the same network I just drew, okay? This gives you an idea of if you want to segment the network. So for instance, you can see here, disregard, it doesn't matter. It's just some firewall, whatever it is. And then everything on the, you can see there, the interface says inside. So anything on the inside on this switch, right? So the simplest thing is just to have one switch and you connect all your computers there. I'm not so much looking for you guys to segment the network as much as it is about like the different services, right? So here you can connect whatever devices you have. This represents the internal network. This would be a firewall with VPN services. This switch 2 is kind of a physical separate subnet. If you look, there's a 10.0.1 and then there's a 192.168.1 subnet, and then there's this one, the 10.10.10 subnet, which represents the internet. So anything, you can see the little cloud there. So anything on switch 3 is a, a web, is the internet. And this is a router. Both of these have ACLs. It just so happens that this one has more restrictive ACLs than this one, okay? So you can think of this type of diagram when you're thinking about your term project, and then just think about, these are a lot of, read through these questions. These are some scenarios that you can try to implement in your project, okay? You don't have to implement all of these, but you can try to implement some of these. And that's why we have to talk about it a little bit. Like, I have to understand what you want to do, or if you have even better ideas, that's perfectly fine as well. So you can see some use cases, right, of this. Trying to configure network address translation on the firewall, trying to just ACLs. These are just basic like ACLs. We'll see this in the firewalls lab, right? So it doesn't matter if you're using Linux firewalls, or if you want to do something with, if you have physical Cisco devices, it's up to you. So the logic is pretty similar in all environments. Okay. So a lot of these are just ACLs that you can read through that can give you ideas of what you might want to do. There's also some logging in there, blocking specific services. You also have like VPNs, right? Having an Active Directory integrated. And then here I have other things like ideas, sniffing, spoofing, syslog, intrusion detections. We'll talk about some of these things in the labs later. Site-to-site VPN, etc. So this is just a list of things that you can do in the project. So in essence, you can implement some of the things that we've done in labs, but I still want to see something specific, like a research project that you're trying to implement. Okay? So I said usually students would do like an IDS, but you might have really good creativity. So I'm kind of leaving it open to you. Okay? So now what I want to suggest is that you guys go into your breakouts. Right, so let me stop sharing. I'm going to suggest that you guys go into your breakouts and kind of start thinking about what you want to do, okay? And then if you have specific questions or ideas that you want to run by me, we can do that, right? And I'll be moving around between the groups. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, great. So let's do that then. Unless there's any like general questions.
Is my mic working now?
Yes, I can hear you, Zach.
Whose group am I in? I wasn't able to say anything.
That's a good question. Let's see. Did we assign SAC to any groups? You may not be in a group, SAC.
Okay.
We'll take, group 7 will take him, if that's okay to have 4 people.
Philip?
Yep.
Thank you, Philip.
Right, but that's a group of 4. Do we have any groups that only have 2 people at this time? Is there any group like that? No? Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'm going to have to add you to that group, Zach, unless we find other students later. Is that okay? Like if we found other students?
That's fine.
But you can start working with them. So that was Philip. Okay, so I'm going to put Zach in there. All right, so I'm going to open the rooms, okay? And then you guys can start talking, and I'll be moving between the groups. And if you have any questions or ideas, just let me know, okay? Okay, so I'm going to click open all rooms. Oh, I'm going to stop the recording.